Hello, my name is Emma Marie Meyer, and today I'll be speaking on behalf of the Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka assaults and murders as an expert forensics witness. In this presentation, I'll be outlining the forensic evidence, history, and nature of Mr. Bernardo and Ms. Homolka's crimes. Mr. Bernardo's crimes first surfaced back in May of 1987, when he violently raped a 21-year-old woman after she got off the bus. He followed her to in front of her parents' house, where he proceeded to attack her from behind and rape her for over a half hour. Here I have compiled a list of Bernardo's rape and attempted rape victims. You can see through each of the assault descriptions it gets progressively more violent, starting by just stalking and raping his victims, to even using a knife, beating them, and verbally abusing them. Now, there's a clear progression in violence and boldness throughout his rapes from 1987 to 1990. This led many investigators to believe that his rapes and assaults would not stop unless perhaps he died or moved away. Even the FBI, in a profile of the Scarborough rapist made in 1988, indicated that the nature of his attacks would continue. He'd continue stalking them, he'd continue to assault from outside, but most importantly, he would not stop. So back in 1990, when the rapes suddenly stopped in Scarborough, this was a big shock, which led actually police to believe that the Scarborough rapist either passed away or moved. Now, what we do know beyond reasonable doubt is that Paul Bernardo is in fact the Scarborough rapist. Back in May 26 of 1990, one of Paul's rape victims was able to create a very accurate police sketch of what he looked like. The computer-generated sketch of the Scarborough rapist was able to generate hundreds of tips, including some that Bernardo knew personally. For these reasons, Bernardo was taken into questioning by police, where he was very compliant, even admitting he looked like the police sketch and offering his DNA for questioning. Despite his charming behavior, his DNA was still submitted to be tested, and he was labeled one of 5 primary suspects. Bernardo's samples were submitted to the CFS on November 21st of 1990 for serology testing to see if his samples were sufficient for DNA testing, and on December 13th of 1990, his results showed that his samples were right for testing, and a request by the CFS was written from Metro to have Bernardo tested to see if he matched the DNA profile of the Scarborough rapist. Even though Paul Bernardo was named one of the 5 primary suspects, it wasn't until February 1st of 1993 that police found the DNA of the Scarborough rapist matched that of Paul Bernardo. Now I'll be getting into the relationship of Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka and how their series of murders began. They met back in October of 1987 during the Scarborough rapes. However, Carla claims to have no knowledge of this up until the death of Leslie Mahaffey during their honeymoon, where Paul revealed this information to her. From the start, their relationship was very far from conventional, and many of her coworkers described their relationship as strange, and Carla was always very weary of how she acted around Paul, writing things in her journal like, make sure to stay thin for Paul, make sure to serve drinks to Paul, etc. From the start of their relationship, Paul Bernardo always showed an interest in Carla's sister, Tammy Homolka. Back in September of 1990, Bernardo began to urge Homolka to allow him to have sex with Tammy. This brings us to December 24th of 1990. Here's some footage of Tammy the night of her murder. On December 24th, 1990, during the family Christmas party, Tammy Lynn Homolka was killed. While the death was initially deemed to be caused by dramatic and unexplained natural causes, upon further investigation, we have reasons to believe that she was murdered by her sister Carla Homolka and fiancé Paul Bernardo. Homolka and Bernardo originally lied to police and told them that they were sitting on the couch of the Homolka family living room when they noticed Tammy, who allegedly was sitting behind them, was unconscious on the floor with a gaseous lump on her throat. They reported that she began to seize and throw up, choking on her own vomit and passing away after attempting to revive her. Despite there being a major discrepancy between the time Tammy died and Paul Bernardo called the police, 15 to 20 minutes, investigators did not choose to investigate this further. During an interview with police, Homolka explains that after persistent urging from Bernardo, she offered Tammy Homolka's virginity to him as a Christmas present, the night of her murder. She reported that Tammy was drugged with a combination of hallucin and alcohol, which she spiked in her drink and served to her. This can be backed up by a toxicological analysis, which indicates Tammy is positive for drugs and alcohol. Miss Homolka continues to explain that after her family went upstairs, her and Bernardo proceeded to additionally put a halothane soaked cloth over her mouth to ensure that she was fully sedated while Paul raped her. Now, Carla initially told the police that she was only involved with the murder of her sister by allowing Paul to rape her and drugging her. However, in video footage, you can see that Carla is actively engaging in the rape and is actually performing coitus with her genitals and Tammy's mouth. Ms. Homolka then proceeds to explain that Tammy eventually began to shake and choke on her own vomit, which ultimately led to her death. After the two realized that Tammy was no longer breathing, they attempted to revive her before calling 911. Despite downplaying her involvement in the role of her sister's murder and rape, Carla's story actually remains mainly true to the events that actually happened on December 24th of 1990. Additionally to being positive for drugs and alcohol in her system, supporting the theory that Paul, Bernardo, and Carla Homolka didn't in fact drug Tammy prior to her rape, Tammy also had a second-degree burn surrounding the outside of her mouth. Originally, her second-degree burn was deemed to be caused by dramatic and unexplained natural causes. However, considering her toxicological analysis being positive for drugs and alcohol, we believe this burn was caused by a combination of gastric contents and chemicals being expelled from her body while throwing up. Through traces of gastric contents in the trachea and peripheral bronchi, we do believe death by asphyxiation of vomit is very likely, supporting Carla's statement. 1 week after Tammy's murder, videotape footage of Homolka dressing up and acting like Tammy, trying to seduce and have sex with Paul Bernardo, was found. Now we are brought to June 14th of 1991, when Leslie Erin Mahaffey went missing. She was last seen by her mother at 7 p.m., leaving to go to a schoolmate's funeral. She was known to be a delinquent, so there's a curfew of 11 p.m. that her mom set in place. Despite this curfew, she decided to stay out till 2 a.m. When she got brought home by a schoolmate, she found this letter on the window. Leslie's mother had enough of her late nights and decided to teach her a lesson by locking her outside of the house and letting her sleep on the patio. Rather than knocking on the door, Leslie did not want to make her parents even more angry and decided to try and call a friend. When her friends went to go pick her up, she was never there. And when her mother woke in the morning, Leslie was also not at home. After 2 weeks of being missing, Leslie's body was found at Lake Gibson on June 29th of 1991. Her body was found dismembered in 8 blocks of cement. Dental records helped confirm her identity. Carla Homolka reported that Paul Bernardo picked up Leslie Mahaffey on June 19th, 1991, just outside her home around 2 or 3 a.m. He kidnapped her and brought her back to his house. When he arrived, he locked the teen in the basement and woke up Carla Homolka, casually telling her that he brought one of his victims home. Videotape footage obtained from Bernardo's household pictures the couple raping the 14-year-old the night she was abducted, penetrating her vaginally, anally, and orally with their genitals, fingers, and other objects. They verbally abused her and beat her with a variety of blunt objects. They also forced her to praise Bernardo and degrade herself. While Homolka told the police that she was forced to perform these acts with Bernardo, she appears to be a very willing participant, showing no signs of struggle and often orchestrating the torture they imposed on the teen. This cycle of abuse allegedly lasted about 24 hours until Bernardo began to strangle her with an electrical cord. This was not caught on tape. According to Ms. Homolka, the first strangulation attempt left Mahaffey unconscious for a few minutes, but after she regained consciousness, Bernardo proceeded to strangle her again, which led to her death. Bernardo testified that Leslie did not die from strangulation, but rather a blunt force trauma to the head, which Homolka hit with her. A second autopsy on Leslie's body was performed on June 8th of 1992. Her body had been sawed into 10 separate pieces with her arms, legs, and head severed, allegedly dismembered by a power saw Bernardo's grandfather gifted to him. The autopsy found that Leslie suffered extensive bruising on her back, indicating that she was beaten multiple times with some sort of blunt object. She additionally had 2 identical circular-shaped bruises on her back, indicating that someone might have rammed their knees into her back just prior to her death. No other cause of death was detected in her dismembered state, so we believe that she died likely due to asphyxiation, supporting the theory that Bernardo strangled the teen to death with an electrical cord. Now we're brought to the murder of Christine French. Shortly before 3 p.m. on a rainy Thursday, April 16th of 1992, the day before Good Friday, Christine French disappeared on her way home from school. She was not home by 5:30, so Donna French, her mother, called Niagara Regional Police and reported Christine missing. After 2 weeks of searching for the teen, her body was found in a ditch along No. 1 Side Road, North Burlington, approximately 1 kilometer from her grave site of victim Leslie Mahaffey. 49-year-old scrap metal dealer Roger Boyer was horrified to come upon a naked body on April 30th of 1992, amidst the underbrush of the side road, while foraging for abandoned farm metal equipment to salvage. Her body was folded into a fetal position as if sleeping, and her once long dark brown hair was cut very short like a boy's. In her school parking lot where Christine was abducted, crime scene technicians identified tire tracks, a horn, and a small lock of hair that appeared to be Christine's. On April 17th of 1992, Christine's shoe was found on Lindwell Road. Additionally to the forensic evidence found on scene, there is 5 witnesses to Christine's disappearance. The first one is a schoolmate that noticed her walking home from school as she was approached by a van along Lindwell Road at around 2:50. A second witness reported a cream-colored Chevy Camaro with rust on the back and primer paint pulled over at Grace Lutheran Church at 2:52. At 2:55, they saw 2 men in a car speaking with Christine. The third witness is a woman that she thought she saw a girl struggling with a passenger in a car with a maroon back seat. The fourth witnesses were drivers that nearly collided with a speeding Camaro just after it pulled out of the church parking lot at around 3 o'clock. The fifth witnesses are students that reported seeing similar car around Holy Cross Lakeport High School days prior to the abduction. For these reasons, we believe that Christine was stalked before getting abducted by Paul Bernardo, which actually lines up with the modus operandi of the Scarborough rapist. Carla Homolka later explains to police that Christine French was abducted by herself and Paul Bernardo from her school parking lot. After Homolka lured her to her car, pretending to ask for directions, Paul Bernardo approached the teen from behind and forced her in the car as she struggled at knife point. She proceeded to explain that they brought the 15-year-old back to their house and they assaulted and tortured her for 3 days. As proven through video footage, Christine French was violently raped, beaten, and forced to drink large amounts of alcohol. She was also verbally praising Paul during the time she was held captive. While Carla Homolka claimed that she was forced to participate, both of them are seen willingly abusing the teen on videotape. This cycle of torture is repeated until April 19, 1992, when she was allegedly strangled to death by the same electrical cord used to restrain her in the basement and also strangle Leslie Mahaffey. According to Homolka, at least, this part of the murder was not caught on tape. Once again, Paul Bernardo claims that he did not kill Christine French, and Homolka was the one that allegedly killed the teen with a blunt-force object to the head. Bernardo claimed Homolka wanted her dead because her family was coming over for dinner that night. In response, Homolka did state that she wanted her gone, but she did not kill her. During the autopsy of Christine French, 6 external injuries and 14 internal injuries were identified, suggesting that Christine was beat with a blunt-force object while she was still living. This does include blunt-force trauma to the head, like Paul stated in his testimony. She also possesses ligature marks outside and inside her neck due to many small hemorrhages in her heart and lungs, indicating her death was caused by asphyxiation through strangulation. This supports Carla's theory on how she passed away. Carla does eventually go to the police, but originally as a victim of domestic violence. She was beat on December 27th of 1992 with a flashlight, causing 2 bruises to form on her eyes. She eventually tells the police of Paul's murders and her involvement in these assaults. However, does leave out some information that was visible on tapes. After reportedly fearing that Paul was going to kill her, she does eventually tell the police that Paul is in fact the Scarborough rapist and has murdered Tammy Homolka, Leslie Mahaffey, and Christine French. She does also go over her involvement very lightly in these murders and assaults. However, she mainly makes herself out to be a victim. On February 1st of 1993, police find that DNA of the Scarborough rapist matches that of Paul Bernardo, and he is arrested. A psychologist analyzes Homolka and believes that she is suffering from battered woman syndrome and PTSD. Upon further investigation, we have noticed that there are some inconsistencies with Homolka's behavior in her initial diagnosis.
We believe she actually suffers from narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, or also known as sociopathy. These mental disorders are characterized as a consistent lack of regard towards others, what is right and wrong, and emotions of others. Even from early years, Homolka possessed these tendencies that later fully uncovered themselves through her relationship with Bernardo. When she was younger, Homolka reportedly bullied people that she thought looked weird, and also threw her friend's pet hamster out their second floor window. The animal died from impact. This cycle of breaking rules and showing little compassion towards others carried on into adulthood, which made her an easy target for manipulation by Bernardo. Throughout their relationship, she actively helped with the rape and murder of 3 known victims. When she went to the police, it was only after she felt that Bernardo would kill her next, being very quick to save herself, but not making any of the slightest efforts for Paul's victims. Some other examples of Homolka's sociopathic tendencies include showing a lack of remorse to police in interviews. She did not cry, she did not apologize, and she lied on multiple occasions. A week after Tammy's death, Homolka pretended to be Tammy, dressed like her, and talked like her during intercourse with Paul Bernardo. On her own will, she abducted and raped Jane Doe with Paul. During a walkthrough of her Port Dalhousie home, she dressed as a schoolgirl, trying to put her experience at the same level of Paul Bernardo's victims, and would often ask questions like, "Is my furniture okay? Can I have this?" rather than actually being concerned about his murders. Additionally to this, it is also important to note that on February 21st of 1993, police found tapes of Jane Doe, a 15-year-old, being raped by Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Through this videotape footage, Doe's account of the incident, and Bernardo's testimony, it is believed that Carla Homolka took Jane Doe on what she believed was a girls' night out on June 7th of 1991. During this time, Homolka drugged her with a combination of alcohol and halcyon sleeping pills, and brought the teen back to her house. Through videotape footage, it is known that both Carla Homolka and Paul Bernardo, separately and together, raped the teen. Homolka failed to mention this to police and claims to have no recollection of the incident. Psychologists described it as PTSD-induced memory loss. Bernardo testifies that Homolka acted on her own will during the rape and abduction of Jane Doe. This concludes all the forensic evidence surrounding the Scarborough rapes and murder of Tammy Homolka, Leslie Mahaffey, and Christine French. Thank you for your time.